Harlem was still half asleep, but the building wasn't. It held its breath the way old wood does when it knows trouble is climbing the stairs. Bumpy Johnson pushed through the front door like he owned the air inside it. No rush, no show. A narrow hallway stretched ahead, dim and tight, smelling of steam heat and yesterday's cigars. Paint peeled in thin curls above. He took 3 steps. Then the hallway filled with metal. 9 barrels lifted as one, quick and ugly, crowding the space until there was nowhere for a man to go except down. Faces leaned out of doorways and shadows. Hard eyes. Wet lips. Men breathing like they'd run here, like they'd been told to be brave and were still trying to remember how. The loudest one stood closest. Young, wired, trying to look older than his years. His knuckles were white around the grip, finger already on the trigger. He spat a little laugh that didn't land. "Thought you'd come alone," he said. Bumpy didn't lift his hands. Didn't touch his coat. Didn't even blink hard. He just stopped and let the silence do the walking. In that quiet, every man holding a gun became aware of his own heartbeat, and how loud it sounded. Bumpy's eyes settled on the loud one like a judge finding the only witness worth hearing. Not angry. Not pleading. Just certain. "You boys got instructions?" Bumpy said, voice low enough to make them lean forward. "But you didn't get permission." A few of them shifted, glancing at each other as the hallway had narrowed. Somebody swallowed. Somebody's muzzle dipped, then corrected itself fast, embarrassed. The loud one forced his grin again. "Permission? From who?" Bumpy let that hang. He knew arrogance needed space to stretch before you snapped it. Outside, a car rolled past, tires hissing on wet pavement. Inside, nobody moved. Active stillness. The kind that turns a second into a threat. From down the corridor, a door clicked, softly. A signal. Bumpy didn't look. He didn't have to. That sound wasn't for him. It was for them. He spoke again, calm as a church. "I came here because I wanted to," he said. "You're standing there because somebody told you to." The loud one tightened his jaw. "And if we don't care what you wanted?" Bumpy's gaze didn't change, but the air did. He nodded once, almost politely. "Then you'll have to explain to your boss why his 9 guns couldn't stop one man, and why the police are already on their way." One barrel trembled. Then another. The loud one's hand started to shake, and he didn't know how to hide it. A click snapped through the hallway. Small, mechanical, undeniable. Not a bang. Not even a pop. Just that dry little failure of fire. For half a heartbeat, 9 men forgot to breathe. The temperature dropped like somebody opened a winter window, and every eye hunted for the mistake. Behind them, a radiator hissed, like even the building was nervous. The loud one froze, then tried to laugh it off. "Ah," he said, too bright. "Ain't that something?" Bumpy didn't move toward it. Didn't flinch away. He let the click sit between them like a verdict. Misfire, empty chamber, or a warning pulled on purpose, either way, it said the first shot was never going to be clean. In that hush, Bumpy's voice sounded heavier than the guns. "Listen," he said, and it wasn't a request. "Everybody in this hallway is being rented." The loud one lifted his chin, starving for spectacle. He was the kind of hungry that needed witnesses, the kind that thought intimidation was leadership. His suit was sharp in the dim, his grin sharper. "You talk pretty for a man boxed in," he said. "You think words stop bullets?" Bumpy's eyes stayed on him, steady as a locked door. "Words are why bullets get paid," he said. A man near the back swallowed. Another shifted, heel scraping. The scrape sounded loud enough to start a riot. Bumpy didn't raise his hands. Didn't show them anything but calm. That calm was the weapon. He took one slow step forward, just enough to make every barrel adjust. "Here's what happens next," he said. "One trigger gets pulled, and it won't be war. War ends. This doesn't." The loud one scoffed. "You threatening us?" Bumpy's mouth barely moved. "I'm describing Harlem." "You shoot me in this hallway," Bumpy said, "your name doesn't get printed. It gets erased from every ledger. No card game. No numbers. No liquor door. No union man. No preacher is taking your mother's donation. You don't get a corner. You don't get a seat. You don't even get remembered as a mistake. Silence pressed in tight. Even the men with guns felt it, the invisible network that fed them and kept their people safe. Bumpy wasn't talking about pride. He was talking about bread. And if you think your boss will protect you, Bumpy added, ask yourself why he sent you instead of coming. That landed. A few muzzles dipped without permission. The loud one watched the wavering barrels and smiled wider, like he enjoyed the wobble. Then he looked back at Bumpy with a slow, satisfied smirk, because to him, all that calm sounded like a man talking himself into a corner. Before 9 barrels found Bumpy in that hallway, Harlem had rules like a church has hymns, half faith, half memory. Men could be brutal, but brutality had to follow a pattern if anyone wanted to keep earning. Money didn't just move, it traveled on routes. The numbers runners, bar owners, union men, the girls upstairs, the doormen who heard everything, each had a place in the machine, and the machine stayed quiet because someone decided what quiet cost. Bumpy was that someone. Not a saint. Not a charity case for the neighborhood. A ruler with rules. He taxed what he touched, protected what he valued, and punished what embarrassed him. If a storefront paid, it didn't get smashed for sport. If a man kept his mouth shut, he could keep his teeth. If a kid ran a message clean, nobody grabbed him just to feel powerful. Under Bumpy's kind of order, Harlem still sinned, but it sinned on schedule. The streets breathed easier because they could predict the next exhale. Respect was the real currency. Not smiles. Not speeches. Respect meant you didn't steal from the weak in daylight. You didn't slap somebody's wife for laughs. You didn't make noise that brought cops down like rain. When a debt had to be collected, it got collected without turning the block into a carnival. And if you wanted to challenge a king, you did it with etiquette, private, deliberate, clean. That's how men survived long enough to get old. Then this new mouth showed up, loud and hungry, wearing confidence like it was armor. He didn't want the routes, he wanted the spotlight. He didn't want the code, he wanted the fear. He understood something dangerous. A crowd pays attention to violence faster than it pays attention to discipline. So he started spending disrespect like cash, publicly, deliberately, because every gasp and rumor was a coin in his pocket. He didn't just step on Bumpy's toes. He stepped on Harlem's. He made examples where there used to be warnings. He raised his voice where men used to whisper. He took what was supposed to be taxed and treated it like a trophy. He embarrassed people on corners, in front of their sons, in front of their customers, and he smiled while he did it. Not because it helped business, but because it created panic. And panic, once you bottle it, sells. That's the mistake. Not the challenge. The disrespect. The message that the old agreements didn't matter anymore. That the neighborhood's calm could be auctioned to the highest bully. In Harlem, lines don't disappear, they get defended. Quietly at first, then all at once. So when you hear that click in the hallway, understand what it is. The sound of a balance tipping. From that moment on, everything becomes a countdown. Every breath is borrowed. Because what comes next won't just settle a feud between men, it will decide who gets to breathe easy in Harlem and who learns to hold it. His first big mistake wasn't pointing 9 guns at Bumpy in a hallway. That was just muscle. Harlem had seen muscle before. The mistake was thinking humiliation could replace authority, thinking a public scene could unmake a man whose name already did the work. It happened in the open, where everyone could hear it, and nobody could pretend they didn't. A busy corner. Midday light. Men with their hands in their pockets, women coming out of shops, a runner holding a slip folded tight like it was a prayer. The kinds of people who weren't in the life, but lived under it. The kinds of people Bumpy's rules kept from being swallowed whole. The enemy arrived like he was entering a stage. Loud suit. Loud laugh. Loud entourage. He didn't walk, he performed. He wanted eyes on him because eyes meant fear, and fear meant rent. He started talking before he even stopped moving, voice bouncing off the brick like a band trying to wake the block. There he is, he said, and he said it like Bumpy was a rumor he'd finally caught. The great protector. The quiet king. A couple of people tried to drift away. Nobody moved fast. Moving fast made you noticeable. Noticeably got you chosen. Bumpy stood there and let the noise hit him. He didn't square up. didn't tighten his jaw. His shoulders stayed loose, hands calm at his sides. The same calm he'd used in that hallway. The same calm that made men with guns feel like children holding stolen fireworks. The enemy closed the distance, smiling too big, like he was daring God to flinch. "All these folks," he said, sweeping his arm wide, including them without asking. "They really think you save 'em? You think they love you?" He leaned in, just enough to make it personal, but kept his voice loud enough to make it public. That was the point. If Bumpy swung, the story would write itself. Temper, impulse, reckless violence. If Bumpy stayed quiet, the enemy would paint him as scared. "Say something," the enemy said, grinning. "Show him you still got teeth." And the street waited for a punch. Bumpy looked at him for a long second, long enough for the enemy's grin to stiffen. Then Bumpy gave him something worse than anger. A polite smile. Not friendly. Not warm. The kind of smile you give a man when you've already decided how the night ends, and you're just being civilized about the timetable. His eyes stayed flat, like he was reading a receipt. "You're doing a lot of talking," Bumpy said softly. The enemy laughed louder, relieved. "That's right. Because you ain't doing none." Bumpy's smile didn't leave. He turned his head slightly, almost like he was acknowledging the people watching. The runner. The shopkeeper. The old man sitting on a crate. The nervous boys pretending they weren't nervous. He didn't have to say he was watching over them. He just made sure they saw he wasn't rattled for them. Then he looked back at the enemy. "Enjoy your day," Bumpy said, voice still calm. "You'll remember it." The enemy blinked, trying to find the insult, trying to find the fight. He didn't get either. He got something cleaner. Something that made the crowd uneasy without knowing why. Bumpy stepped around him like the enemy was furniture. The performance was over. And as he walked away, his calm didn't break, because it didn't need to. That's when the real show started. Quietly, without announcement, Bumpy began taking pieces off the board. A nod to a man by a doorway. A brief word to someone passing by. A look that said enough. No threats. No speeches. Just small, invisible decisions snapping into place. The enemy was still smiling, still soaking up attention, still believing he'd boxed Bumpy in. Nobody noticed the pivot. Nobody saw the options disappearing. But they were. One by one. Bumpy didn't believe in respecting the way preachers talked about it. He didn't mean please and thank you. He meant a system, built, enforced, and maintained, like plumbing. You didn't notice it when it worked. You only noticed when it broke and everything started stinking. Loyalty to Bumpy was never blind. It was earned, then paid back with interest. A man who stayed solid didn't just get a handshake. He got protection that actually meant something. He got problems handled quietly. He got a warning before the storm. He got a chance to fix a mistake before the street fixed it for him. But disrespect? Disrespect wasn't an emotion. It was a leak. And leaks, if you ignored them, turned buildings into ruins. That's why Bumpy used violence the way a surgeon uses a blade. Not for the thrill. Not for the noise. Only when it bought control. Only when it made tomorrow smoother than today. Chaos was expensive. Chaos brought heat. Chaos made men sloppy and made cops greedy. Bumpy didn't want Harlem screaming. He wanted Harlem operating. He saw the neighborhood like a chessboard, but not the fancy kind people played in parks. His board had rent due. His pieces had mothers. His pawns carried envelopes and counted steps. Fear could turn a man into a quick soldier, sure, fear could make him pull a trigger fast. But fear didn't build anything that lasted. Fear made men disappear the second winter came, and money got thin. Respect built infrastructure. Respect meant the bartender still let your runner in through the back. Respect meant the number of women kept your name safe in their mouths. Respect meant the union guy returned your call, even when it was dangerous to pick up. Respect meant the kid on the corner didn't point out your car to strangers. Respect meant a door stayed closed when it should, and opened when it needed to. That's what the loud enemy didn't understand. He thought power was volume. He thought a crowd watching meant a crown. He thought the point was to be seen, to be feared in daylight, to make men lower their eyes on command. He didn't realize fear runs out faster than cash. He didn't realize the streets get cold, and when they do, People stop performing and start surviving. Bumpy knew power was quieter than that. Power was who still answered you when the cops started leaning on everybody. Power was who took your meeting when the money dried up. Power was whose name could calm a block without a gunshot. Power was whose silence carried more weight than another man's shouting. That's why Bumpy could smile at a provocation like it was nothing. Because in his head, he wasn't reacting to a scene, he was calculating a season. He wasn't thinking about the enemy's mouth. He was thinking about the enemy's network. Who fed him? Who feared him? Who secretly hated him? Who would fold the moment the heat changed? Admiration and dread lived in the same place with Bumpy. You could respect him without liking him. You could feel safer under his rules while knowing his rules would bury you if you got stupid. His calm wasn't kindness. His calm was math. And Bumpy had one rule he never broke, not even when anger begged him to. He didn't destroy a man first. He destroyed the man's confidence. Bumpy didn't chase the loud man. Chasing is for boys and dogs. He sat with the problem long enough to learn what it ate. Every loudmouth in Harlem had the same weakness. It needed to be fed: money, safe rooms, loyal hitters, police tolerance, and a neighborhood still looked away. So Bumpy started with needs, not noise. First, the money flow. The enemy could talk all day, but talk doesn't pay shooters or grease palms. Bumpy traced the cash like a vein, bars washing it, numbers spots kicking up, drivers letting certain crates disappear. Then he didn't hit the enemy. He hit the certainty. A runner arrived late to a drop, empty-handed, insisting nobody robbed him. A bartender who used to smile said he was closed for repairs. A backroom game moved, and the new address never reached the enemy's people. Small delays. The kind that makes a man count his stack twice. Next, safe locations. Harlem had doors you could vanish behind if the right people still liked you. Bumpy didn't kick those doors in. He made sure they stopped opening. A superintendent got a visit and an envelope. A basement that used to rent space for meetings found new locks. A landlord decided he didn't want trouble on his property. Nobody confessed. The enemy just kept arriving in dark rooms and closed mouths. Then, loyalty. Loud men think loyalty comes from fear. Bumpy knew loyalty comes from belief. Belief you'll still be standing tomorrow. So he chose one trusted intermediary, the kind of middleman who sold information like cigarettes. Bumpy didn't threaten him. He offered him a future. One conversation. One promise. One reminder that a man becomes disposable the second he's only valued for what he carries. After that, the intermediary still worked for the enemy. Only now every message arrived late, every number was wrong, every introduction came with an invisible warning attached. And then Bumpy made an example. Not in the street. Not for headlines. Just a lesson that traveled without a confession. A small crew that had been bragging about switching sides woke up to find their stash house cleaned out and their guns gone. No blood. No witnesses. Just an absence so loud it moved faster than gossip. Men didn't say Bumpy did it. They just stopped talking like betrayal was easy. The enemy responded the way arrogant men always do when the room starts shrinking. He got louder. He threw parties he couldn't afford. He barked at underlings in public. He made threats on corners just to hear his own voice bounce back. Panic makes performers, and he was built for performance. Every day his speeches got bigger, and every day his circle got thinner. Bumpy, meanwhile, got quieter. Because control doesn't need announcements. It needs permissions. Who can operate, who gets protected, who gets taxed, who gets tolerated by the police, and who gets covered by the community. While the enemy hunted for a fistfight, Bumpy was on phones and in backrooms, trading futures. Weeks passed. The enemy didn't understand why his men were missing, why cops showed up at the wrong time, why his money felt hot before he touched it. He kept waiting for Bumpy to swing first. Then one night he sat alone in a car outside a club that used to welcome him, and he watched the door stay closed. No doorman. No nod. No music leaking out. Just glass, silence, and a street that didn't recognize him. That's when it finally hit him. This wasn't a street fight. It was a slow execution. When a loud man starts losing, he doesn't get humble. He gets theatrical. He looks for a moment big enough to erase the weeks of quiet bleeding. And once the enemy realized Bumpy wasn't coming for his throat, once he realized Bumpy was taking his air, he did the only thing he knew how to do. He set a deadline. Not in a private room. Not through back channels. He made sure it traveled. A message dropped into bars, into number spots, into the mouths of runners who didn't want to carry it. 48 hours. Either Bumpy bowed in public, or Harlem was going to watch people die until the whole neighborhood chose a side. That's the kind of threat that doesn't just scare enemies. It scares the innocent. The shopkeeper who doesn't know which way to look. The kid who runs packages and wants to make it home. The woman counting bills behind a counter while pretending she can't hear men arguing outside. A deadline turns a street into a clock, and every tick sounds like a footstep. By the first night you could feel it. Not in gunshots, there weren't any yet, but in the way doors closed faster. In the way conversations ended when a stranger walked by. In the way cars idled too long at corners. Harlem tightened like a fist. The enemy loved that. He called it control. He started showing up where he shouldn't, loud enough to make sure people noticed. He sent boys to lean on businesses that had stopped paying him, not to collect, just to be seen collecting. He wanted witnesses. He wanted fear to do what money wasn't doing anymore. He wanted to force Bumpy into the kind of emotional mistake that looked like weakness. Bumpy didn't answer the threat with a threat. He answered it with time. He let the deadline hang in the air and watched what it did to the enemy's people. A rushed man reveals his structure. A desperate man exposes his soft parts. And the more the enemy tried to make the city jump, the more his own crew started tripping over their feet. Because 48 hours isn't just pressure. It's a test. It asks every soldier, every fixer, every crooked cop, every landlord, every bartender, who do you believe will still be here on the other side of this? Bumpy already had that answer in his pocket. He used the clock like a knife, slicing away at the weak links the enemy didn't know he had. A hitter who'd been loud about loyalty suddenly couldn't be found. A driver claimed his car, broke down, at the worst possible moment. A patrolman who used to look the other way started taking a different route, like he'd remembered he had a family. The enemy thought these were coincidences. Bad luck. Harlem being Harlem. But it was Bumpy applying weight to a cracked foundation. Hour by hour, the enemy was forced to make decisions faster than he could think. He started trusting men he hadn't properly tested. He started pulling in hungry boys who wanted stripes more than survival. He started talking to cops who smiled too politely. He started promising money he didn't have, protection he couldn't guarantee, glory he couldn't deliver. The louder he got, the more Harlem heard what was underneath it. Panic. And through all of it, Bumpy stayed quiet enough to be terrifying. No speeches. No public meetings. Just calm movement. A word to one man. A nod to another. A phone call that ended in understood. He didn't need to announce control. Control is what remains when the noise collapses. Still, Harlem didn't relax. It couldn't. Deadlines don't care about reputations. A single nervous trigger can start a fire even a king has to run from. People wondered, in whispers, if Bumpy could keep the streets from breaking when a desperate man decided to prove a point with blood. By the second day, the enemy stopped pretending it was about business. He wanted a show. He wanted Bumpy in front of people, smaller than the myth. He wanted the neighborhood to watch its protector bend. So he sent the final instruction, come alone, come quiet, come now. The address wasn't written down. It was passed mouth to ear like a curse. A narrow building. A tight corridor. A place where sound couldn't spread fast enough to save anyone. A Harlem hallway. The same kind of hallway where 9 guns could rise at once, and nobody outside would hear the first breath before the shot. Bumpy Johnson stepped into the hallway like he was arriving on time. 9 barrels lifted as one, tight, hungry, loud with intention. But now we understood what the gunman didn't. The trap wasn't for Bumpy. It was for the man who needed this to look simple. Each shooter had a reason to hesitate, and Bumpy had made sure they felt it. Closest was a hitter with a gold tooth and a cheap watch. Weeks back, he'd rolled dice and come up short against Bumpy. He'd run from that debt until a quiet message found him. The tab disappears if you don't do anything foolish today. To Bumpy's left, a tall kid with a flat cap held his pistol too high. His brother worked the elevators at the Teresa. When a manager tried to squeeze him, Bumpy stopped it without a show. The kid remembered. Further down, a scar-knuckled man kept glancing at the stairwell. His woman had been sick, and a doctor showed up that morning. No cops, no questions, cash already settled. That wasn't charity. That was proof. And in the shadow of a doorway stood an older one, quiet as a bookkeeper. He just learned the loud enemy had been skimming from their cut and calling it expenses. He didn't want to die for a thief. Bumpy let his eyes travel across them, not as targets, as men who still had choices. He didn't reach for his coat. He held the silence like it was something he owned. The hallway smelled of steam heat and old cigar smoke, and the men could hear their breathing, ragged and fast, in the next apartment over. Bumpy's stillness forced them to feel every ounce of it. In that quiet, the loud enemy's confidence sounded thin, like a radio turned down to static. Then the loud enemy stepped forward, wearing a grin that didn't fit. "There he is," he said. "You ready to bow?" Bumpy's voice stayed low. "You gave Harlem 48 hours, he said. "That was generous." "I gave you 48 hours, the enemy snapped. Bumpy nodded. "And you spent it buying 9 borrowed hands," he said. "That tells me you ran out of time first." A couple barrels wavered. The enemy caught it and got louder. "Don't listen to him," he barked. "He's talking because he can't do nothing." Bumpy didn't even look insulted. "Nobody here wants a massacre," he said. "Massacres don't make money. They make funerals. And funerals make cops." The enemy laughed sharp. "Cops already love you, Bumpy?" "Cops love whoever stays useful," Bumpy said. "You've been making yourself noticeable." That word hit his crew. Not one of them wanted attention. The enemy's grin collapsed. "I said you bow," he shouted. "Right here. Or we start shooting until Harlem learns who owns it." Bumpy looked at him like he was watching a man overplay his hand. "You're confusing ownership with noise," he said. "One echoes." The enemy stepped closer, fast. "You think you're smarter than me?" Bumpy leaned in just enough to make the air lean with him. "I think you're scared," he said. "And scared men don't pay on time." Something shifted. The gold-tooth hitter swallowed. The kid's elbows softened. The bookkeeper's barrel dipped a fraction, like his wrist finally told the truth. The enemy saw it and panicked out loud. "Hold them guns up," he yelled, turning on his own men. "Hold 'em up." Bumpy kept his gaze on him, calm enough to cut. "You brought them here to watch you," he said softly. "Not to die for you." That was the moment the room changed. The first gun lowered, an inch, then another. The enemy turned, looking for loyalty, and found hesitation staring back. For the first time, he understood what Bumpy had arranged before he arrived. And with that understanding, he realized he was alone. Bumpy didn't touch a gun. He didn't have to. He stood there while the hallway chose what it would be, slaughter or lesson. The first barrel lowered, then another. Not all the way, just enough to show the hands behind them were thinking. The enemy tried to reclaim the room with volume. He barked orders, cursed, promised money, promised glory. Each promise sounded like a man bidding with empty pockets. Bumpy let him spend his breath. Then he smiled, small, polite, deadly. "You brought 9 men," Bumpy said, "and you still had to do all the yelling." A shooter shifted his feet, no longer squared to Bumpy, but angled away from the enemy. Subtle, but in Harlem, subtle is a siren. Another tucked his chin, eyes dropping, the way men do when they've chosen who's steady. The enemy's face tightened. "You think they're yours?" Bumpy's voice stayed soft. "I think they're tired of being rented." He spoke in the hallway without raising his tone. "You want to die for somebody skimming your cut? Or you want to go home and keep your name clean?" Silence answered. The enemy swallowed and lifted his pistol higher, desperate for one last image. "I'll do it myself." Bumpy didn't flinch. He looked at the weapon like it was paperwork. "Go on," he said, "and watch every door in Harlem close on you tomorrow." That did it. The kid in the flat cap lowered his gun completely. Then the gold-tooth hitter. Then the older one in the doorway. One by one, muzzles dropped, shoulders relaxed, and the enemy's circle turned into a line, facing him. Bumpy stepped forward like the barrels were curtains. He stopped close enough that the loud man could smell his calm. "You wanted a show," Bumpy murmured. "Here it is." He didn't strike him. He made him small. A hand on the enemy's lapel, a quick pat like dusting off a suit, and a sentence that landed heavier than a punch. "You can walk out," Bumpy said, "but you're walking out broke." The enemy blinked. "What?" "Every room you rent, I own the key," Bumpy said. "Every dollar you touch is already counted. Every man you pay will be paid to forget you." He stepped aside, granting the enemy movement while stripping him of meaning. The loud man walked because he had to, and the hallway watched him go as a joke told too late. On the stoop outside, men who'd come to witness murder now watched him leave, laughing behind closed teeth. By morning, the message slid through Harlem faster than newspapers. Bumpy Johnson let him live. Harlem did the rest. By the time the sun climbed over Harlem, the story had already finished changing hands. It wasn't 9 guns people kept talking about. Harlem had seen guns. It was the stand-down that felt unreal, the moment a hallway full of killers decided the loud man wasn't worth the trouble of pulling a trigger. They told it in barber chairs and back rooms, in whispers over number slips, in the pause before a bartender slid a glass. Same detail every time. Bumpy Johnson never raised his voice. He never begged. He never reached. He just stood there and let the neighborhood remember who kept the lights on. That's what the guns proved. Not that Bumpy was fearless. Fear was never the issue. The issue was influence. He understood that respect wasn't a mood. It was infrastructure. Respect kept you alive because it made people invest in your tomorrow. Betrayal made you disposable because it told the street you couldn't be trusted with anyone's future. The enemy tried to buy power with noise. He tried to instill panic as if it were currency. Under pressure, it collapsed the way cheap metal does. Loud at first, then suddenly bent. Disciplined power did the opposite. It multiplied. It turned hesitation into loyalty, and loyalty into order. From the 20s into the 60s, that order carried Bumpy's name like a badge and a warning label. Men used it to keep wolves off their block. Men used it to collect what wasn't theirs without destroying Harlem. For better and worse, the underworld ran smoother under his quiet enforcement, routes steadier, deals cleaner, chaos taxed until it couldn't afford itself. And when somebody new came up, hungry and theatrical, the first advice they heard was never about guns. It was about calls. About who still answered. About which doors opened, and which stayed shut no matter how hard you knocked. Mothers who never met him still used his name to settle boys down. Cops who hated him still respected the quiet he maintained, because quiet meant fewer headlines. Even rivals learned the difference between surviving a night and surviving a decade. In that city, Harlem remembered the quiet man because he taught a simple lesson with no blood on the floor: volume doesn't win, control does. And somewhere, right now, another challenger is clearing his throat, thinking loud is the same as strong.